So Liberation Day, as Trump calls it, was essentially the moment where the trade war that we've been experiencing in Canada went global. So Trump announced a 10% tariff across the board, which impacts all countries around the world. And he also went specifically country by country and put higher tariff rates on a whole bunch of countries. So China, the EU, Japan, Korea are all suddenly going to kind of be experiencing this trade war that we in Canada have been experiencing for months. So the big news for Canada on quote-unquote Liberation Day was the fact that we were actually hit a lot less hard than I think a lot of people feared. Canada and Mexico aren't going to be subject to the reciprocal tariffs that apply to most other countries around the world, or really all other countries around the world. Canada and Mexico had already been facing tariffs. You probably remember the tariffs that were put on in early March that were ostensibly around fentanyl trafficking and illegal migration. So those tariffs are still in place, but the important part is Trump gave an exemption to those tariffs for Canada and Mexico for all goods that comply with the Continental Trade Agreement, which the Americans call the USMCA. Here in Canada, we call the CUSMA. Everybody probably remembers it as NAFTA, which is what it used to be called. But the key point is that exemption that was granted for goods that trade under the CUSMA or under the USMCA are going to continue. That means a large portion of trade coming from Canada and coming from Mexico into the US is going to be able to trade tariff-free. That's a big difference than what was announced for all other countries. So Canada is still facing tariffs. We're not scot-free. Auto tariffs are coming into effect. Tariffs in steel and aluminum are coming into effect. We're still in a trade war with the United States, but in many ways, Liberation Day wasn't as harsh on Canada or Mexico as it could have been. So what goods are actually going to be exempt from these tariffs? What actually does it mean to be compliant with the USMCA or CUSMA? Well, essentially the Continental Free Trade Agreement has all sorts of rules. They call them rules of origin, which are meant to make sure that products that are made in Canada, Mexico, and the United States are made using parts that also come from Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So if I meet a whole set of rules, and it changes product by product, but essentially what I need to be able to do is I need to be able to show that a certain portion of my good, a certain amount of the widget that I'm shipping across the border was made within North America. So last year, about 40%, give or take, of goods that were shipped from Canada into the United States had a USMCA compliant stamp. The actual amount that could theoretically be compliant with the USMCA is probably a lot higher. In the past, a lot of companies didn't bother going through the process of certifying that all their widgets came from Canada, the US, or Mexico, because they were able to trade the goods at very low tariffs anyway. What's kind of changing right now is all of a sudden, if you're not compliant with the USMCA, you're facing pretty high tariffs. So there's going to be a scramble by companies across the country to make sure they have all the paperwork ready and make sure they're able to get that USMCA compliant stamp so they can cross the border tariff-free. You have to go back to the 1930s and the infamous Smoot-Hawley Act to see a kind of jump in tariff rates like we've seen. So it's basically a big sledgehammer the US has taken to the system of global trade that it built after the Second World War. That was all about trying to lower tariffs, trying to make trade more easy, more free. Trump's moving in the opposite direction. He's taking an ultra-protectionist view that basically wants to stymie trade, move investment into the United States, really doesn't believe in the value of free trade. That's a pretty sharp break with what we've seen for decades. And while Canada, I think, definitely got a lighter ride than expected, the shock to the global trading system is pretty profound.